Okay, thanks, Miriam. Hey, so you're all very welcome this evening. There are a few more who might join us along the way. And welcome to everybody who might be watching this on the recording as well. So delighted to be here with you all. I was saying just before we started properly that it's such a lovely evening. I feel bad for keeping you indoors, but it might still be lovely in an hour. So be able to get out into nature. Okay, so I'm going to just share my screen to start with. I have a few slides that I wanted to show in a little presentation, and we'll be probably about an hour or so, kind of the usual. So I hope you can see that. Is that okay for everybody?
Yes, yes.
Brilliant. Okay, lovely. Okay, so this is our March Doughnut Economics Dominican Virtual Cuppa. So delighted to see you all here this evening. I suppose I've put up the picture of the globe because just kind of reflecting on the global situation at the moment, with conflict and political instability and natural disasters, it can feel quite challenging sometimes. And of course, we're all thinking of those affected by the recent earthquake in Myanmar and in Thailand. Um, there's the ongoing challenge of climate change, and I was giving a talk on migration at the middle of last week and was reflecting on the many reasons why people leave, and of course, climate change and environmental disasters and crises being high up on the list, and yet not recognized yet as a reason for seeking asylum, seeking refuge. So a lot of challenges going on, and it can sometimes feel overwhelming, but I suppose we keep on returning to share and learn and explore together this model of sustainable economics that we call Doughnut economics. So this is our latest in the ongoing work in terms of looking at Doughnut economics together, and looking at different aspects of that model and ways that we might adopt it. So just to look at a little agenda for this evening, I want to talk a little bit about Doughnut economics and systems change. And the reason I have that on the agenda is actually because I was sent the most amazing video by Sister Susie O'Rourke up in Belfast, and I really wanted to share it with you, but to put it in context, and it relates well to talk about systems change and Doughnut economics. I want to update a little bit on the Doughnut economics global updates from DEAL, from the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, and the various different groups around the world that are doing work there. I want to talk a bit about particular planetary boundary, so that outer circle in the donut, the environmental ceiling, and particularly talking about tackling biodiversity loss. And then I want to just mention briefly some work that I'm doing on donut economics with Amri, and a suggestion to try and widen our donut circle a little bit, which will follow on from the Amri conversation. Okay, so first of all, I suppose when we're talking about systems change, we're talking about reconfiguring a system in all of its parts to make a new system that works better. And in relation to donut economics, we're talking about changing the system to make it work better for people and for planet, so that there's that better balance between, as Laudato Si would put it, the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. So I want to just go back to listening to a few words from Kate Raworth to remind us that we, our society, and our economy are all part of the living world. So Kate Raworth, of course, being the British economist, the English economist, who came up with the idea of donut economics in 2012. So I just want to share a quote from Kate Raworth, from an interview that she gave, and then I'm going to share that video that Susie sent me. So she says, "Here's the market, and the metric of concern is price, and anything that falls outside of that we call an externality. So every economist is taught to talk about environmental breakdown as that's an environmental externality. To me, this was the first reason that I thought there was no way we could do justice to the living world and the extraordinary damage we're doing to her if we go around calling it an externality. The economy is a social construct. We invent our economy. The good news is that we can reinvent it. Our societies are part of the living world. Our economies need to be aligned with how this planet works. Those are the only laws that we need to be following. The economy needs to move from degenerative to regenerative to create a more circular system that reuses and repairs in industry, agriculture, transport, and energy, in how we use all materials. So essentially, we're talking about a new system where wealth is not all about money. So I'm sharing with you a quote from the poem that I'm going to show you, from the video that I'm about to show you, which is a poem. Wealth was the abundance of the earth, the song of the harvest, the joy of enough. And this quote is looking back to a time before what mattered was markets and wealth and money. It was a different form of wealth. So I'm going to share with you a video that, as I said, Susie sent me. It's described as a poetic provocation, and it's by a South African poet and activist called Ashanti Kunene. So I'm just going to stop sharing our presentation for a moment. And yeah, okay, so if anybody can't hear this, maybe Miriam, you might let me know. And otherwise I'll go full screen.
So I've been asked to do a poetic provocation, but before I begin, I invite you all to take a deep breath in and inhale.
I'm sorry, is everybody hearing that okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Just had a moment of doubt about my sound. Okay.
So I've been asked to do a poetic provocation, but before I begin, I invite you all to take a deep breath in and inhale the privilege of being in my presence today. And exhale any entitlement to the gifts my presence brings you in this present moment, yeah? I come before you not as an expert in anything, but as an anointed daughter of the African soil found at the cradle of humankind. I come as the original keeper of stories, the ones they buried but could not kill. And so I ask you to listen, not just with your ears, but with the memory held deep in your bones, held deep in your blood. For the story of wealth begins with the body. Long before there were markets, before there were stocks, before there were banks, there was the land, the river, the sun. And wealth, beloveds, was the abundance of the earth. It was the song of the harvest. It was the hands that tilled the soil. It was the joy of enough. But then came the colonial lust for conquests, taking, the grabbing. Wealth became a thing to be hoarded and not shared. It became a beastly mark of power, a capitalistic tool of control. It became land stolen, bodies stolen, futures stolen. The plantations of the past are the corporations of the present. The auction blocks are now the stock exchanges. The trade routes are now the supply chains. The overseer is now the CEO. The language has changed, but the rhythm of extraction and dehumanization has remained the same. The currency of power still flows in one direction, upward, outward, and away from the many into the hands of the few. Intergenerational wealth, they call it, but what is it really? It is the remnants of old contracts signed in blood. It is the unbearable weight of past deeds pressing into the present. You are experiencing the karma of riches built on suffering, and it would be unrighteous of us to not allow you to experience the full cycle of your ancestral karma. And so I ask you, what ghosts live in the wealth you hold? What stories are stitched into the fabric of your investments? What bodies are buried beneath your portfolios? What voices whisper between your metrics? What of the ecosystems too complex to be captured by your charts? What of the sacred that resists commodification? Can you stand in the messiness of it all? Can you hold what cannot be scaled? Can you risk not just your funds, but your egoic frameworks, your fragile feelings? You who are the most powerful, are you truly able to share your power and privilege, a sharing that is required for systems change? And while you think about that, understand you will name me in this room. You will name me She, mother, earth, womb, from whence you came, tomb to which you will return. You will name me in this room. You will recall the reverence for life that we have forgotten. This is not a game. This is not a fire drill. You will remember, you must remember to name me. Heed this call and name me in the fine print of emerging, regenerative future economic possibilities. For I am not a bottom line, nor am I a footnote to be forgotten. I am not a DEI variable to be adjusted for. I am the mother of every market you have ever and will ever build. So name me in this room. And while you remember to say my name, unfrown your brow, unclench your jaw, unarmor your hearts, and unfist your hands. Because remember, my loves, there's no systemic impact without deep intimacy. There's no transformation without relational tenderness. And there's no future without her. She, mother, earth, womb from which we all come, tomb to which we will all return. Name her, and may it all be well. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
So-
Prince.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me just stop this. Now. So some powerful, very powerful words there. I should have said at the start that that poetic provocation by Ashanti Kunene was written for, you might have seen at the top of your screens, the Systemic Investing Summit 2025. So she was speaking to investors, investors who are interested in putting their money into sustainable projects, but investors nonetheless. So very powerful words.
Mm.
The story of wealth, the land, the river, the sun. Wealth was the abundance of the earth until it became a thing to be hoarded and not shared. Susie sent me this particularly in relation to our work on doughnut economics. So I think there's a real a power there to those words. I'm going to go back and just share my screen again because I wanted to follow on from that poem with a little bit more information. Just find my place. Now. Okay. So that was a poetic provocation by Ashanti Kunene. And she talked about, the poem is called Name Me. And she's basically speaking, I suppose she is the voice of the earth. She's speaking for she, for mother, for earth. And I suppose it resonated really in terms of Laudato Si and the response to the cry of the earth and our efforts through our work on doughnut economics to try and answer that cry, as well as our work on ecology and ecological spirituality. So yeah, I think it spoke to me, that poem. So to move on to stories from around the world, I attended a Zoom call with other people working on doughnut economics from various different countries, including the Netherlands, Brazil, South Africa, Spain, and London, England. So there were some interesting details shared, and I just want to go through those quickly. So the first one was Global Doughnut Day. So there was an update on how Global Doughnut Day 2024 went, and then looking at plans for the next Doughnut Day. So I'm going to come back to that in a moment. The representative from Amsterdam highlighted the fact that it's going to be the 5th anniversary of the Amsterdam Doughnut Coalition. So they started right in the middle of pandemic, or rather right at the start of the pandemic. We heard about the challenges of engaging communities in doughnut economics where community groups had not had much collaboration before. That was from London. So I'm going to go through these in a little bit more detail in a moment. The challenge of pushing a green agenda when government members have connections with the fossil fuel industry. So that was from South Africa. And then plans for an online version of the Step into the Doughnut workshop. So that was an interesting one. And something that I think could be quite exciting, actually. So Global Doughnut Day 2024, it was held in 82 places in 34 countries. And they estimate that about 4,000 people attended in-person events across the day. So it was held in November 2024. So the debate about it really is at what time of year should it be held? So the November 2024 one was the first one that had ever been held, but it still could be kind of a movable feast. It's not a fixed date yet. And so DEAL, the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, which is Kate Rayworth's, I suppose, collective kind of website bringing together people working on this issue, they're looking for feedback on when we think the Doughnut Day should be held. And the options really are that it would be October 2025, or that they would actually move it to springtime, which would fall in spring 2026. So in the meeting that I was at, and in some of the discussion that I've been reading since as well, there seems to be a bit of a move towards it being springtime, for a number of reasons. I think the weather obviously helps, and it can be really lovely to do Doughnut economics events outdoors, weather permitting. And also because an October event, even though it's 2 months after the summer, it could be hard to actually kind of gear up and get all your invitations out and so on, especially with August being shut down for a lot of offices and organizations. So it'd be interesting maybe to talk at the end when I stop sharing my screen, just to see if anybody has any perspective on that. So that was the Global Doughnut Days. So they're looking at either October or maybe April, just keeping in mind Easter and the fact that that moves as well. The 5th anniversary of the Amsterdam Doughnut Coalition, that was really just to kind of, I suppose, to mark that date as being the oldest Doughnut Coalition group, which is really great. And it's also very well structured. They have staff, that they're employing, they have funding. And so I think they are kind of a group that other smaller Doughnut networks like the Irish Doughnut Economics Network would look to as an inspiration for the way that things could be done. The example from London. So this was a woman who's working in a community project in London, and she was trying to bring together two different communities, two different boroughs. So one of them was Brixton in London, and the other was a neighbouring borough whose name escapes me now, but it wouldn't be as kind of well known or as well developed in terms of community work. So she was talking about that. How do you get people involved? Brixton has a long history of community engagement and activism, but the newer suburb that she was working with didn't have that. If I was to think of an example from my perspective, it would perhaps be Stoneybatter as being the very well-established group that has a lot of I've talked before about Cozy Batter and all the different groups that are working on sustainable development, installation, biodiversity in Stoneybatter. Very, very well established. Whereas when you come up maybe towards where we are, further up in Cabra in the Navan Road, there's not such a clear community or even such a clear border for the geographic area that you're talking about. So it was interesting to hear her challenge in terms of how you get these communities working together. The example from South Africa, just to mention briefly. So the South African minister who is, one second now, I have his name, Gwede Mantashe. So he is the minister who is in charge of energy and the environment in South Africa, but he also has a lot of close associates who benefit from coal mining. And there have been, I suppose, a number of insinuations that he's actually benefiting from the coal industry as well, and he calls himself the coal king. So just that challenge there of trying to push a green agenda when the fossil fuel industry is really, really embedded within the government. And then just to mention what I was quite excited to hear was plans for an online version of the Step into the Doughnut workshop. So those of you who've done this before will know that it's quite a movement-based workshop. So you can see here, this was the Step into the Doughnut that was held at the Irish Museum of Modern Art last September, which Kate Rayworth attended. And it's quite movement-based. You form a circle together, you form the outer boundary of the doughnut, so the environmental ceiling, and then you form the inner circle, which is the social foundation. And all the while you're talking about that experience of where you feel you are on the circle, and even as so much as kind of pulling on the rope to show where the tension lies between those who are taking too much and those who don't have enough. So it'll be interesting to see how that design works for an online Step into the Doughnut, because I think it could be very powerful, and I could offer it to to people, to sisters and to communities who might not necessarily get a chance otherwise. So I think watch this space. It's only being designed at the moment. And the Doughnut Economics Action Lab are going to share that with us all as soon as they have it. So moving on from looking around the world to back home in Ireland. And I mentioned that I wanted to look at the planetary boundaries, and one of those being biodiversity loss. So looking particularly at the situation of biodiversity loss in Ireland. So according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Service, nature is declining globally at rates unprecedented in human history. 1 in every 5th species in Ireland is threatened with extinction. 1 in every 3rd species of bee in Ireland is threatened with extinction, which becomes all the more important when we think that 78% of our wild plants are pollinated by insects. And of the 100 crops that provide 90% of the world's food, 71 of those are pollinated by bees. So we can really see the importance of bees, of our pollinators, and therefore of the biodiversity that they rely on. So an attempt to combat, to challenge this biodiversity loss comes in the form of the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. And you can see the website there, www.pollinators.ie. And there's some really great resources on this, both in terms of videos, webinars, and also booklets and resources for how we might put into action the All Ireland Pollinator Plan in schools, in faith communities, and various other places. So at the end of the presentation, which we're recording, but I will also be sharing an email with all of these links as well. So don't worry if you don't capture them right now. To look now at who our pollinators are. So pollinating insects such as bees, wasps, hoverflies, who are often overlooked, and butterflies help in maintaining biodiversity and vibrant ecosystems for plants, humans, and other animals. 95% of the world's 20,000 species of bee are solitary rather than social bees. So Ireland has over 100 bee species, 1 species of honeybee, 21 bumblebee species, and 80 species of solitary bees, with most of these ground nesting. And that's important, the ground nesting detail. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. So I have to say, my mind was kind of blown to realize how many different species of bee there were in Ireland. This beautiful poster from pollinators.ie shows the solitary bees of Ireland. And if you can see on your screen, some of them have a little red dot with EN for endangered and some with VU for vulnerable. So you can see the ones that are at risk there. And to look for a moment at the impact of biodiversity loss. So it's important to note that the link to sustainable development is clear, and current negative trends in biodiversity and ecosystems are undermining progress towards 80% of the Sustainable Development Goal targets related to poverty, hunger, health, water, cities, climate, oceans, and land. Biodiversity loss is not only an environmental issue, but also a developmental, economic, security, social, and a moral issue as well. So when we're looking again at our Doughnut graphic, we can see the ecological ceiling and biodiversity loss there on the bottom left corner, which I've mentioned. But we can also see the inside circle, the social foundation. And so many of those things that are threatened by biodiversity loss, we see there water, food, health, and so on. The Sustainable Development Goals essentially being put at risk because of the impact of biodiversity loss. So to look for a moment at what we can do in our gardens, the photograph that you see in front of you is from our No Mow May campaign, which was held, this one I think is from 2 years ago, but regularly communities will leave their gardens to grow. And so these are some of the photographs that were shared from all across Ireland of what happens when you let nature flourish. So what we can do in our gardens. There are 2 million gardens in Ireland, it's estimated, in a recent study by Maynooth University. And they could be seen as a new national park if managed for biodiversity. So they're separate, they're scattered around the country, but pollinators don't see boundaries. So if we imagine them as one giant national park and try and think about that journey that pollinators take across from garden to garden to garden. So first of all, protect what's already there. Identify mini habitats in your garden. So in terms of protecting what's already there, I want to go back for a moment to the solitary bee, the one that burrows into the soil rather than living in a hive. So that's why it's so important to not clear up all of the leaves that fall, to not have these immaculate gardens, but actually to leave it a little bit wild. So protect what's there and look at those mini habitats. What is there? Um, I probably, because of lack of time and sometimes energy, do have a wonderful nettle patch at the back of my garden, which I have to warn visiting children about. But according to a webinar that I watched recently on the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, it's a wonderful source for butterflies. The flower of the nettle. It's one of the first foods for them. So everything has its place. So try and take part in No Mow May, and maybe even with signage to explain. So the webinar that I was watching talked about how some tidy towns groups were getting involved in No Mow May, but were having complaints because apparently grass that was not mown looked untidy or unkempt. So a little sign just to say we are leaving this grass to grow to help the pollinators can be a help. Also, just a reminder that there's to be no hedge cutting between March and August, and that's particularly to facilitate nesting birds. So those are some of the things that we can try and do in our own gardens. It's not necessarily about always doing. Sometimes it's just about leaving things be. We also can try to eliminate invasive species, and we can find out more about that and what they are on www.invasives.ie. And in terms of gardening for biodiversity, so one of the things we can do is organic native wildflower gardening. So the webinar, which I'll share the link in a future email, it's well worth a watch. They gave a serious note of caution about generic wildflower mixes, wildflower seed mixes, so the likes that you might get from Aldi or Lidl, or other supermarket chains are also available. But they just really had a note of caution that I suppose the first thing to do would be to have local flowers. So, if people were able to actually just get local flower seeds year on year, that would be your best option. But the second best option is to get organic native wildflower seeds. So what I've done with thanks to Cynthia and the Cosmic Garden Group is to order a kilo of native organic wildflower seeds, which I'd like to offer to anybody participating this evening, anybody listening to the recording, to Dominican communities, to offer you about 50 grams each. So we can divide this parcel up and get our wildflowers growing. I was preparing the ground in my garden at the weekend, and that's certainly something that we can do in terms of gardening for biodiversity. So I hope that's something that might be of interest. So protecting biodiversity, I wanted to just mention that resource, that booklet, Faith Communities, Actions to Help Pollinators. So this is a really comprehensive guide, and it's well worth a look. It's available on www.pollinators.ie. Also to note that National Biodiversity Week is in the middle of May, and as luck would have it, it coincides with Laudato Si Week. So that's kind of a watch this space notice, because I hope to do something with the Cosmic Garden Group, and myself and Ronnie, to try and mark Biodiversity Week, but also mark Laudato Si Week as well. And then the webinar that I've referred to a couple of times is the Gardening for Biodiversity with the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. And it was held 2 weeks ago. And it's available on YouTube. So I'll share all of these links as well by email. But it's well worth a look. It goes through in kind of great detail the things that you can do in your garden, from mapping your mini habitats to just leaving things be, and then advice on gardening and planting. I want to briefly mention some work that I'm doing with Amri. So on Saturday of this week, next weekend, Saturday the 5th, we're holding a Justice Symposium. So we were calling it a conference, and then we thought it's a little bit soon for a conference. It's more of a meeting of minds. It's an attempt to bring together people working on justice and peace, including ecology, from all the different congregations that are members of AMRI. So we're holding this Justice Symposium. We're inviting 2 representatives from each congregation. So we already have our places filled for the Dominican congregation. And we've opened it up to all congregations. So we hope to meet and just to talk about the issues that we have in common, the challenges of working on justice issues in today's environment, political environment. And the title is A Future with Hope. So my part in that, as well as helping to organize it, will be to bring Step into the Doughnut to participants. So I'm very excited about that. We hope to have 60 to 70 participants. So a good spread, we hope, of congregations from around the country. And so I'll be doing the Step into the Doughnut workshop to try and, I suppose, show this economic model as a compass for our justice work, for our ecology work, and also a lens through which we can look at our overall work and our lifestyles and our ways of being. So going back for a moment to that symposium, one of the things that I hope will come out of it will be an interest in doughnut economics following on from my workshop. And my question to the group for afterwards is, would we consider inviting other congregations to join us for these Zoom meetings to explore doughnut economics together? It's something that might require, first of all, an initial introduction by me to the other congregations, just to get people up to speed. And then I hope it's something that you might consider widening the circle so that we can include other congregations in the conversation. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing there. But yeah, the 2 questions really that I was interested in hearing from you about would be whether people had any thoughts on the Global Doughnut Day, whether it should be October or Easter, and then also if we would be open to considering widening our doughnut circle. We already have, as I see here this evening, Cynthia from the Cosmic Garden Group, Michael Kenny, who I met at a Laudato Si event with Trocra, and who's on our mailing list. So we're already, and sometimes we have some of the house managers as well, Deirdre from Galway, from Taylor's Hill. We've already widened it somewhat. And I suppose my question is there room for other congregations in that circle as well? So I might open it up to anybody who has feedback. Ronnie, perhaps, as the one who's closest to all of this, if you would like to kick us off, maybe?
Yes. Well, your material in your presentation is so rich. It seems very selfish to keep it just for us, Dominican, that it would be a Dominican cuppa. It's obviously time to widen that circle. I think it's a marvelous thing, and that next Saturday's meeting would be, a step in that direction to see who are the most interested. It mightn't be that many people, our congregations, but it's certainly opening the door to having other people in with us and benefiting from all your work. It's great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ronnie. Liz,
Yes.
you can raise your hand. Yeah.
It's 1st October or April. Either are good choices because we have to remember spring in the north is autumn in the south. So we have to keep that in mind. Autumn in the north is spring in the south. So it's good to look for a time when the temperatures are comfortable in north and south. That's my comment on that. The other about widening it out, I think that's terribly important. And as you were speaking, I'm thinking of the group we have, which we call Companions on the Journey. And it's a mixture of sisters and, let me say, non-sisters. And I'd be very happy if we agreed to open it wider and to include people who are part of that group. I could send out the message from you, Lara, to that group. The more people you include, and I'd say the more people who do not belong to organised religious communities, the wider, the more thinking people begin to do.
Brilliant. Thanks, Liz. absolutely. I think on the timing of the Global Donut Day, your point is very valid in terms of thinking about the north-south divide. Um, Another thought that struck me was particularly for the next Global Donut Day, just within the Dominican congregation and in terms of the change in council leadership coming at the end of the summer, that maybe it would be a good idea just to let those new people settle in a little bit before there's a kind of a big event that they need to be involved in, or, having me very involved in. But yeah, thank you for that. And I suppose just to give a little bit of context, particularly for the newer attendees this evening, the reason that we started doing our own Dominican cuppa was because we were attending uh, Zoom meetings that were being organized by the Irish Doughnut Economics Network. So a quite kind of widespread group across the island of Ireland working on doughnut economics in their communities. And Dominican sisters were attending in quite large numbers, which was great. But we then thought, okay, maybe we're not dominating, because there wasn't that vibe at all. But we're slightly heavy in number, let's say. So we thought, well, perhaps we'll bring our meeting to another place, and still keep in touch with the Irish Doughnut Economics Network, but have our own meeting, and I suppose bring in maybe the faith-based element as well, and Laudato Si, and kind of other elements of our work as well. So that's just to give a bit of context on why we've had our own, but now maybe the time has come to widen it out. Thanks, Liz. Anybody else want to chip in?
Oh yeah, I think it's very important that we widen it out, And as you were talking earlier about biodiversity, I was thinking about the Connect Cabra. They have quite a good biodiversity group and a lot of gardening going on there. And also they took part in one of the early meetings here. And I know that's local now, and we're trying to spread it out, but also to involve people who are doing different things in different places, so we can share ideas.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. I agree. Connecting Cabra it's great, and it's working with some of those groups in Stoneybatter that I mentioned. So I think Cabra, Stoneybatter would be our kind of local hub of that kind of work. So it would definitely be great to get involved. And I suppose that the doughnut economics groups that are working really well are the ones that involve and pull in other people who are working on, other aspects of sustainability. So definitely makes sense.
I think it would be a good idea as well to open it up. Except with my data protection hat on, we need to think of a way of, asking people to register or something like that, but that can be done.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. When we are widening it, and especially I suppose if we're recording and we want to have this kind of free-flowing conversation, maybe there's parts that would be recorded and shared and parts that would be not, that could be done as well. And I think I know, Joan, you were going to come in there, but just on Liz's point about the companions on the journey and any other newer groups that we get involved, I think, as I said before, I'd be happy to do kind of an introductory session, so that it wouldn't be, many of you have heard me describe the donut so many times. I wouldn't want to bore those who have been with us on this journey for the last couple of years, but I could certainly do an introductory session, and then people could join in our larger meeting, Joan.
No, I was just going to say that you mentioned the Irish Doughnut Network, but I know the West Cork Doughnut grassroots group are very, very active, and it wouldn't be any harm if they got a double invitation, if they got, because they really have an exquisite number of grassroots, down to earth kind of workshops going on in West Cork. And they at the very beginning, they really enriched very much the whole idea of doughnut economics not being up in the air, but being down in the soil, and that,
Thanks, Joan.
and with real examples of real things that are happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
I'm not saying that the other things aren't, but I would just love them because they enriched us. And also, I'd hate to lose the South African connection with Francis. you know, I don't know whether they just haven't the energy to keep going, but they gave great enrichment at the beginning.
Mm. Thank you. I know, and Frances was very involved, wasn't she, in
Yeah,
writing the kind of initial plan for the congregation getting involved in donut economics.
yeah.
Whenever she can, she always responds to the newsletter and sends me suggestions. So I would often include stories that she sends me for the newsletter on sustainability and that kind of thing. And there's a great group in South Africa. One of them was on the Zoom call that I mentioned for those global donut
Oh, yeah.
connections. I'm just trying to find the name here. Green Connections. They're based in Cape Town. And they're doing lots of work on sustainability and circular economy and all sorts of things like that. So I must make sure that Frances and the sisters in South Africa are aware of that as well. I'm sure they are, but
Yeah, yeah.
just to make the connections. Yeah. Thanks,
Thank
Joan.
you for all that enrichment.
Thank you.
It's wonderful.
Anybody else, you're welcome to say a few words, or Cynthia? Yeah.
Thanks for a great presentation, as usual, Lara. You know the Margaret Aylward Centre in Glasnevin, the Holy Faith Sisters, they're very much involved in creation and ecology and that, so might be no harm linking with them.
Okay.
And see would
Thank
they
you.
be
Yeah.
interested in joining us, and it's not too far away, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Even exactly. Geographically nice and close.
Yeah.
I'm hoping somebody from there will be at the Amri conference, so I'll have a good idea. There's about 45 people registered at the moment, and we expect people who just to drop in on the day who haven't registered. So, but I'm writing that down now just to follow up with. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Great.
What about the Mercy Sisters? Haven't they got some kind of a have they got kind of projects today?
You're
Did you
thinking
mention?
impact investment, but I think they're
Yeah.
probably on the invitation list anyway from Amri.
Yeah.
They would be all right. I'm not sure
Yeah.
who's attending, but yeah,
Yeah.
they would
So-
be. Yeah. Okay. I'll be able to let you know at the next meeting who came exactly from all the different congregations connected with Amri. So it'll be interesting to see who actually turns up, because people apparently have been asking for a justice conference or meeting for years, but we've had to really chase numbers. So it kind of shows maybe that whether people are stretched or don't have a designated justice person, it's a bit of a challenge to actually get people there. So I'll let you know how it all goes.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking that a lot of what we talk about in donut economics, An Taoiseach has been working at this for years, and so it's not even like they're parallel streams. It's all of a oneness. And so as we, meet around donut economics, it's not like a new concept that into the congregation. It's a new term.
Yeah.
But I think if we had practical ways of making that more visible, that An Taoiseach donut economics, it's all, and our invitation to us all to be part of, preservation of the earth and the conservation of the earth.
Well,
Colette from An Taoiseach is actually going to be attending the Amri meeting. So she's been invited to give a talk on ecological theology and spirituality. So that'll be really interesting.
Yeah.
Ronnie, did you want to come in there?
to add in, as Liz mentions, on Taoiseach, I'm reading a book by Diarmaid O'Murray, who is often asked to speak down there. And he has incorporated the whole language of sustainability and relationship with the earth into this theology of religious life. So on the subject of poverty, he calls it now a vow for mutual sustainability. So he brings in this lingo, that we're getting to. And he says that we need to be direct involvement in bringing about systemic changes, largely unknown in previous times. And he mentioned political, economic, and social. So then he goes on to say that we also need to change the language itself to respect the fact that in biblical terms, poverty is an evil, not to be embraced in any sense. In other words, violent poverty, not a great name, but to be gotten rid of at every level. And so he goes on to all around us are everything linked to creation and the planet and so on. Gift, all around us is gift, not mere commodity. The whole tone is just the same as Doughnut economics. The same, as you've just presented in some of your part of your PowerPoint. And then according to prevailing economic theories, we claim that the goods of creation are scarce, when in fact they're abundant, and that the goods must be fought for in competition, when in truth we need to learn afresh how to collaborate creatively with the blessed resources of creation. So I'm really enjoying it because I find echoes on this chapter all the time of Doughnut economics. And that
Lovely.
this is the idea of systemic change as opposed to, helping helping the marginalized, helping the poor directly, which he says we put charity over justice. So the focus that we're getting through Doughnut is on systemic change, large scale fighting in a global way, how wealth is managed and how the gifts of the earth are managed. So I just wanted to add it in there as to link it with our theology and our way of thinking about our own religious life. Yeah.
Thanks, Ronnie. That's great. And that might be something you might share some of that at the Amri meeting on Saturday as well, just to link that. It's not that it's anything new, it's a different way of looking at the work that's being done, a different vocabulary, and maybe a compass, a guide. Thank you.
Just to go back to Liz's idea of An Taoiseach being linked up to Doughnut economics, already in one of the last, I just think it was last year or the year before, two of the women from the West Cork Doughnut were invited by Colette to do you remember, to give talks? They had 1 or 2 days of a workshop. So that was the beginning. That was because it was so linked up. And if that could continue in a smaller way, let's say with the sabbatical course, so that another weekend or a day even of not necessarily the West Cork Doughnut, but Lara or
Absolutely, yeah. To have that as a regular feature. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Joan.
But as a regular feature, knowing that this is what An Taoiseach does, it has always done.
Exactly.
It's not like an add-in subject.
No.
Yeah.
But they haven't really got into the specifics, they've been into renewing our relationship with the earth and with evolution and so on. But in fact, they've never got into a systemic change around economy or finance or capitalism. And it really is a novelty for us to be in on that particular angle. It's related, but it is a different step. Yeah.
Thanks, Ronnie. Is there anybody else who hasn't had a chance to speak yet who'd like to share a few words?
Okay.
Welcome, Angela, who's just joined us as well.
Hello, Angela.
She can't hear you because she's mute. She's
muted.
She might be hearing us, but muted.
She may not want to speak.
It's grand.
What about Michael? Have you anything to say?
Can I just say thank you very much, particularly Laura, for the opportunity to just join you and listen to it. So I'm discovering a whole new network of people. I live in Maynooth but I'm not part of any particular structure like this. So thank you. So I'm happy to listen for the moment.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Hi, Angela. I know you're just joining us now.
Laura, forgive me. I won't go into the detail, but I'm trying to get over the shock of not having been here and came home and realized what had happened. Forgive me, please.
Not at
There'll be
all, not at all.
recording.
It is a recording, exactly. It's no panic.
The recording, thank God for that.
Thanks to Miriam. Great. Well,
Thanks, Miriam.
we've had a good conversation, I think, and the consensus seems to be that we would like to widen our circle in whatever the best way is through our networks, through the group that Liz has mentioned, the companions on the journey, and through whatever connections I make next Saturday at the Amri Justice Symposium. And then we'll see about a way of including people in this conversation in a way that makes sense for everybody, and in a way that's, I suppose, in terms of data protection and all the rest, we'll work that out as well. And we can invite people to register for an upcoming Zoom. So that's great. Thank you all for your participation this evening. If anybody has any final questions or points to make, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself. And otherwise, I might let you all go out into the rest of this lovely evening. And I'll be sure to share all of the links that I've mentioned with you in a follow-up email as well to everybody.
Bridget is going to say something.
No, I was just going to thank Lara once more for always the wonderful presentation and reminding us always and keeping us up to date. So thank you very much, Lara.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lara.
And just a reminder, and thank you to the Cosmic Garden Group. This is my big 1 kilo of organic native wildflower seeds, which I'll be dividing up, and very welcome. I mean, I'll be delighted to be sending it out to communities and individuals, including yourself, Michael. Cynthia, I think you're probably already drowning in seeds yourself. But thanks for the recommendation for the brand and the type of seed to get. So much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
We'll be blooming.
I'd be happy to get that portion if it's available, and we'd use it for our Tidy Towns group.
Fantastic. I'll follow up with you by email, Michael, and I can get your postal address. I'll be working on that probably early next week, I'd say. That's great.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for attending and for giving us
Thank you.